Oh my God. That was awesome. I feel like something very momentous is about to happen from those
Mhm.
graphics and that music. So I hope everyone is suitably prepared. Um, so, welcome everybody who is watching. I am Monica Byrne. This is John Scalzi. And I'm very honored to be talking to you today about Kaiju Preservation Society, which I finished last night. Do you have the book to hold up? You there.
Hold on. I got a cat on me right now, so
Okay, there we go.
I'm I'm moving slow.
We've been warned that cats may make appearances throughout. I
Please.
think, oh, hello. Oh, that's beautiful. I think we all welcome those occurrences. So thank you for warning us. Um, also, it's in the chat, but I wanted to tell everybody signed copies will be mailed after the event. And so to expect them 8 to 10 days, 8 to 10 business days from now. And the run of the show of this conversation is that I will ask John some questions, and then you will ask John some questions, and I will select from the Q&A. So you can look down at the Q&A below, and you can write a question, and then you can upvote each other's questions, like on Reddit, or I think that's how it works on Reddit. You can upvote each other's questions, and then I will select from them when the time comes. So get your questions ready. But in the meantime, John, how are you?
I'm good. I am back on land. I was actually at sea for a week on a cruise, and that was great. And I was hopefully going to have 2 days to be at home and relax, but of course, flights being what they were, we actually got delayed a day. But I'm here now, and I've got a cat on me. And so, yeah, life is good. And rumor is, and I don't know if this is true, we'll have to check with sources. I might have a book coming out real soon now.
Tomorrow! And I
Oh,
finished it last night. I finished it last night, and it is so good, everybody. I sent a letter out to my news list saying, if you don't know John Scalzi, I mean, I'm sure everybody in this chat knows who John is, but I tried to describe him as, imagine if William Goldman wrote science fiction on cocaine. That was my that was my attempt to sort of capture your sui generis writing. So I and all
that
of that is
is
a compliment.
that is possibly the most amazing compared because I love William Goldman. I mean, for the folks who don't know, he obviously wrote The Princess Bride, but also Marathon Man, a bunch of other stuff. He's a huge influence on on my writing. So to have that noticed is pretty amazing. The on cocaine is a twist, which I kind of like as well. I mean,
On Coke
I
Zero.
have never done cocaine, so I can't say, but yeah, no, I will take that. Thank you very much. The cat has
You're
now,
really welcome.
uh, yeah,
The cat is
uh,
now disgusted with you
yeah,
for
exactly.
having
She's like,
not done cocaine.
I'm not here for the cocaine. She'll be
Yes.
back.
Well, John is fueled by Coke Zero. Wait. We have to get a look at what you're drinking.
It is in fact
It
Coke Zero. This is
is Coke
my
Zero.
Coke of choice. Yeah. No, it's people are like, you've never taken a drug because I don't drink and I don't smoke and I've never taken an illegal pharmaceutical. And they're like, how do you actually, how do you write? Because I think people just assume that writers are just fueled by, speed and spite. But for me, it's
All of those
just
are great.
endless Coke Zero, right? So
Yes.
this is probably like my fifth of the day. I really should cut back because I want to actually have teeth when I'm 60, but for now it's fine.
For now, I mean, just go with it. Like whatever works. I feel the same with coffee. You don't even drink coffee, and that to
No,
me
no,
is deeply shocking. And
no.
you have opinions about its taste that I respect. So
Right, right. Well, To point, I mean, it tastes like ass. It's just, I don't understand how people drink it. There's so many drinks, and I think both coffee and alcohol are this way, that you have to acclimate yourself to them in order to enjoy them and to know all the distinctions. And I'm like, I understand that, but why would you do that? Right.
Why would
And I've never really heard a good reason for it, except people are like, look, I need it. I need the caffeine. And I get that. I totally understand that. I totally respect that. I'm just saying, there are better ways. There are better,
there?
more flavorful.
Yes. Well, I envy the fact that you somehow missed that train, because what put me on it was an 8 a.m. calculus class, and I just couldn't.
Right.
I was like, I need to stay awake through this. So that's how I got on it. Anyway, let's talk about
Right.
your book. The William Goldman
What?
writes science fiction on cocaine. So I want to begin by saying you wrote this book in a very special set of circumstances, or you had the idea for the
Yeah.
book. So first, I want you to talk about those circumstances, and then I want to get to the idea. But what was the background?
So the background of it was in 2020, I was writing an entirely different book, an entirely different novel. And it was best described, or I've been describing it to people as like Das Boot in space. It was dark and moody and gritty, kind of political, kind of cynical, and it turns out that 2020 was the absolute worst possible year to write dark, gritty, moody, cynical, and political thriller in space or on land, no matter what. It was just because the world was on fire, as we all know. Most of us were there for 2020. And those of you who weren't, I don't know where you went, but bless you for having found an escape. And for me, part of the fun of writing is the world's on fire. Well, at least I can construct this world that I'm enjoying. I was not enjoying this world at all. So the individual sentences were fine. The paragraphs were good. The chapters were okay. None of it hung together. And I ended up writing something around 60,000 words, which was actually just the same 10,000 words, starting it over and over and over and over. And then in late 2020, I got sick, and all the tests tell me it's not COVID. But all the way my brain felt, it was basically pudding. And I couldn't do any sort of writing at all. And so all of that, came to a head. January came around and I was like, new year, new me, we're going to start writing. And on the first Monday in January, which was January 4th, I wrote 250 words. I'm like, that's a good start. And then the next day I wrote 500 words. I'm like, I'm liking where this is going. And then January 6th happened. And I'm like, I'm not writing anything until the 20th at least, right? And then the 20th happened, and I gave it another week or so just to make sure it took.
Yeah.
And then I
Meaning the
wrote 30, and
inauguration.
then I wrote, yeah. And then I wrote
Yeah.
3,400 words, and it was great. And then the next day I came to my computer, and for the first time literally in years, I couldn't find what I was writing the day before. It was just not there. And that was a sign to me that this book was cursed, and I hated it, and I hated everything about it. And it just made me feel bad. And I wanted it to like burn in a fire somewhere. And I had to write that to my editor, Patrick Nielsen Hayden. I was just like, I can't do this book anymore. It's everything I loathe about the last year. And as it happens, Patrick had lived through 2020 as well, so he had some context for this. And he was great because he's like, yeah, well, even though it's on the schedule, even though we've already started the artwork for the cover, fine, we'll just pull that. And I'm like, and I was like both relieved and racked with guilt, because it's the first time that I haven't been able to finish a book, right? Just was not able to do it. But I was like, but it needed to be off my schedule. I literally couldn't write it anymore. So then I went to go take a celebratory shower because I needed one. And while I was in the shower, it's like my brain said, oh, hey, remember that book that you were absolutely never going to finish writing anyway? Well, while you were freaking yourself out about that, I had this other idea that I've been mulling over, and here it is. And literally the whole thing, the whole of Kaiju Preservation Society downloaded into my brain like almost instantly. Like first the title came, the Kaiju Preservation Society, and then my brain went plonk, and there it all was. And I didn't immediately leap out of the the shower Archimedes like shouting eureka, right? But so I tailed off. I went back to my computer and I typed to Patrick. I was like, "Hey, remember how I was freaking out that I wouldn't have a novel for you? Give me 6 weeks." And I ended up writing it in 5. And it was the easiest writing process I have ever had in my life. It was basically a gift, and I'm bitterly envious that it happened this one time. And I'm like, why haven't all my books happened like this? And the answer is because to get that 5 weeks of pure joy, I had to go through an entire year of absolute pain. And so that wasn't the fun to the joy to pain ratio there was actually higher than I needed it to be. But the end result was this book that I'm super happy with, very proud of, that came super simply.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, my follow-up question was going to be this what John is describing is um it's a mythical occurrence in authors' lives that it happens to them like once in a there are other authors who just say, it all the whole concept, the whole setup, it just dropped into my brain. And it's rare that that happens, and it's like I said, a
Yeah,
mythical occurrence. And so I was going to ask you exactly what room you were in and
yeah,
what
yeah.
you were eating or not eating, what you were wearing, but now we
Right.
know. Now
I
we
was
know you
naked
put
at the
that on.
time.
You naked at the time. There we go, everybody.
Naked at the
Well,
time. Yeah.
showers are
It
great
was just,
things.
yeah, no, showers are good. Showers are where I do most of my thinking because I'm literally doing nothing else besides standing there and getting wet. Occasionally I soap up, but the thing about it was, it was complete. The thing about it really was that it was completely unexpected. I had no idea that my brain had been mulling anything other than this one book that I had going in front of me. I'm really glad my brain works the way it does, where it was plotting, I don't want to say plotting against me, but certainly plotting something for me, just in case the thing that I was working on wasn't working, which clearly it wasn't. And I feel bad about that other book because that other book is a really great concept. I kind of want to go back to it one day, but just not anytime soon. I've really got to get some space between me and that book. That's why I don't mention the name of that particular book at the moment because, I don't, if I ever come back to it, I don't want people going, "Hey, that's the book that you hated and didn't want to write. You've written it now. And clearly that's something you don't want us to read." It's like, no, if I release it, I want you to read it. But yeah, it'll be a while before I get to that one, if at all.
Different stories have different times. I mean, I think there are constraints around what story you feel like you need to tell, and those are historical circumstances. And like
Oh,
this really
yeah,
was.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, and the thing that I like about Kaiju, which is that it's a genuine release. I mean, it was a release for me to write it, like I said. And so far, everybody who's read it, almost everybody who's read it, um, has been like, I didn't know I needed this book, right? Because it's, as I say to people, it's not a deep book. It's not a weighty book, but it is, there are some interesting things about it, but it is meant to be fun. It is meant to move fast. It is meant to be joyful to read. And that's what I needed, both as a reader, as a writer, is to really reconnect with the joy of writing. That's happened before in my career. Around 2008, I had a real down patch. I'd had a fight with my publisher that has since been patched up. I want to clear that up. We're great now, but at the time I was kind of cranky with them, and I was feeling cranky about my writing, and so I ended up writing a story that I did without any expectation of ever selling it, and that became Fuzzy Nation, where I just wrote it to see what would happen. And that was really important to me, to rediscover the joy of writing a book, just to write the book. And in many ways, Kaiju was similar because it was unexpected, it was unplanned, it was a surprise in almost every way that a book could be a surprise. And just reconnecting with just telling a story to tell a story and not worrying about how it's going to do or whether anybody is going to like it but me, was rejuvenating, I want to say, because if I hadn't had that, if it hadn't been waiting in the wings for me, I kind of don't know where I would be right now. I mean, I would probably still be grinding gears. So I'm incredibly grateful that this book exists at all.
Well, so am I. And let me just say for everybody, having read it, I feel I feel that joy and fun actually serve very profound functions. And
Mhm.
I know you said, in passing, it's not deep. To me, it was. And joy is deep,
Mhm.
and fun is deep,
Yeah,
and serves a very profound purpose, especially in difficult times. And that is,
sure.
again, what this book did for me. There are also things, I'm getting sidetracked already, which is what happens.
That's
But
okay.
I know. There is a beautiful passage, I thought, about
Mhm.
how kaiju were, like, somebody said, kaiju are dumb, or they're not intelligent. Somebody said they're not intelligent, and
Mhm.
another character responded like, well, they don't play the stock market, but that doesn't mean they're not intelligent. They're just like many different forms of intelligence. And I
Sure.
I love that. I love that. And it made me
Yeah.
think about, well, now I'm skipping ahead, but it made me think
Well, that's
about
okay. There's no set list. Go wherever
there,
it goes.
there is, and I know, but I have my enumerated questions. Um, I have to go in order. No, this is what happens. So when I first heard the title of your new book, I
Mm,
admit I did not know what kaiju were. So if you could give
right,
us the John Scalzi dictionary definition, what is a kaiju? Just
right,
intro course.
right. Well, I mean, very literally, it means strange beast in Japanese, right?
Uh,
And th- the most commonly understood thing to be a kaiju would be like Godzilla or Mothra or Rodan, all of those monsters that came into being after the nuclear age had begun and began so disastrously, actually, in Japan. And the interesting thing about the kaiju, aside from, the implied biological issues of having a creature that large, or how they would work and how they would work in an ecosystem, which are all things, that I go into in the book, because I am the sort of person that just can't have a large creature. I need to actually make them work with the square cube law, which is,
yep.
the physical thing of you can only have animals of this size. So what are you doing with Godzilla? And it's like, I've got an answer for that. Uh, but the other thing is, and I think this is one of those things that this is where my brain is working on deeper things when, or my subconscious is working on deeper things when my forebrain is working on the light and frothy stuff, right? Which is that kaiju, since their creation with Godzilla in 1954, um, are metaphors. They represent things. They originally represented, of course, the terror and perror of the nuclear age. I mean, obviously, the Japanese had a front row seat for everything that was terrible about that, and using the kaiju as a metaphor for that made perfect sense. Kaiju also work as a metaphor in the age that we are all experiencing now, where this plague is stomping across the earth in an unassailable way that we, for the longest time, were not able to control or deal with, other than hide. Everybody hide. Here comes the monster. And when I was writing it, I was just writing, well, kaiju, they're big. But as it turns out, I'm writing, I wrote it, and it takes place between March 2020 and March 2021. And now that I have a year distance from it, like almost literally a year distance from it, I will pass the 1 year completion mark on March 19th when I'm in Rhode Island. Then, but it is, COVID is a kaiju. COVID is this thing that doesn't care about it, doesn't care about us, doesn't worry about what it's doing to us. Our concerns are not its concerns. It's just doing the thing that it does. It exists and we have to deal with it. So in many ways, like I said, kaiju are large, immense creatures, but they're always been a metaphor as well. And this tradition continues in Kaiju Preservation Society.
It absolutely does. And also, there is, I don't want to give away any spoilers, but the attitude towards the kaiju in the book is
Mm-hmm.
affection. Like there is
Mm-hmm.
not a little bit in my reading of it, there's not a little bit of affection towards the kaiju and what their predicaments are. And I wondered where
Sure.
that came from.
Part of it was, I don't want to say contrariness, it's like everybody thinks the kaiju are monsters, but what about their heart? That's not where I was going with it.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you know, kaiju do not exist to be antagonists for humans, right? They don't actually, in the context of anything, even exist to be metaphors for us. We put the metaphor on them, but they exist because they exist. They exist like blue whales exist, or mosquitoes exist, or paramecium exists. They are not here for us. Whatever meaning we attach to them is whatever meaning we attach to them. So that being the case, I wanted to create a world of kaiju where the kaiju just existed, where we were the interlopers, and that our relationship to them had to be understanding where they are literally on their own turf, right? And once you understand that they are these immense creatures, I don't want to call them animals because that's something that gets discussed in the book itself,
Mhm.
but these immense creatures whose concerns, interests, existence is literally beyond ours. Then they start going, well, what is our relationship to these creatures? They don't mean us harm. In fact, they have a set of motivations, rationales, and an intelligence, as noted, that is not necessarily ours at all. How do we respond to that? And this is what I think is really interesting. The characters that we are working with are not people whose buildings are being smashed by the kaiju, or the people whose lives are being ruined by a kaiju fight in San Francisco or Tokyo or wherever. They are literally scientists. They are literally, workers trying to understand this creature that exists in front of them and to give that creature context not only for themselves, but in the context of their world in general. And then that is a perspective that we don't always see when we're talking about kaiju, or even talking about animals, right? So as far as it goes, I thought that was an interesting avenue to pursue. The only time we ever see kaiju in films or anywhere else has been when they come to Earth, and whether they are there intentionally or unintentionally, they are a interloper into the ecosystem, and they wreak havoc, right? So let's put them someplace where wreaking havoc is not the order of the day. They do wreak havoc, but that's accounted for within the ecosystem itself. And that
Yeah.
being the case, where do you go from there? And I do think it's something that's often alluded to when we are in kaiju films and in other kaiju books and stuff like that, or entertainments that involve kaiju. But I don't know that it's ever been developed like I have developed it, which doesn't mean like I am a genius, I am doing something no one else has done, but merely that was the thing that interested me about addressing it. It's sort of like going back to red shirts. Everybody had heard the joke of, it's like, Ensign Jones, you're going down with Sulu and Spock and Kirk. Have fun. And, Ensign Jones is like, well, I've had a good life,
Yeah.
but developing it from there and seeing that even the red shirts have interior lives. It's the same sort of thing, that you take something that's already been established that everybody knows, but then you went and looked at it at a different perspective. And if that's the gift I bring to a lot of my literature, is taking a slightly different angle at stuff that people have already experienced before, right?
Yeah.
A new look
Yeah.
at pop culture.
Yeah. And I will also say, so I have official, quote unquote, well, not official, academic scientific training. And I was reading Kaiju Preservation Society and the explanations of the biology of the kaiju. And the whole time I was just like, makes sense. Yes, yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. Actually, it makes total sense. So, like,
Right.
one of the biggest challenges in world building is plausibility, is
Yep.
just like, how do you convince your reader of this entirely other? I mean, like, this is, this is, I think, even for you, m- farther outside the realm of plausibility that you've gone before, and again you totally pull it off. So like, what is the internal bar that you are aiming for in terms of plausibility? Like, if you write a sentence, are you like, would I buy that, or that's bullshit? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do. And the thing about it is that, I've always said that the secret to writing plausible science fiction is get what we already know right, right? Um,
Yeah.
and once you get what we already know right, then you can responsibly extrapolate from there, and people will go wherever you want them to go. Like, I don't run away, like talking about the square cube law. The square cube law is basically, for everybody else in the audience, that however large your animal is, its height in area is, there's the square of the height and the cube of the volume. So that after a certain point, they just can't exist anymore. If you were to take an elephant and you were make it 20 times the size, that elephant would be dead, because the muscles couldn't pump blood, they couldn't breathe, they would just collapse in a puddle. Same with you. Attack of the 50-foot woman. That 50-foot woman would be on the ground going, because she couldn't breathe. Ant-Man can't happen. Either direction. Now, the thing about it is, when you're doing it in movies and TV and, comic books, especially today, where, the special effects have gotten so good, you can make it look so realistic that the eye, and the brain are just like, I'm just going to go. Godzilla looks like he could happen because, and anybody who's got, but square cube law, you're just like, shut up. I want to watch the city be destroyed. Quiet. And that's not unreasonable, right? You just buy in. But for a book, you don't have the nifty special effects, and you have 80 to 100,000 words that you have to fill. And so you have to sort of explain it. And so for me, I'm like, okay, I can't ignore the square cube law, but I do need creatures that are 100 to 150 meters tall and everything that implies, right? So how am I going to pull that off? And that's where you delve into, you need a power system that is not just run on biology. You need a system that compensates for the mass of the creature with literally like minions, right? All the parasites and all the commensal creatures and everything else like that. And you go and you go and you go. And the secret is, don't over-explain it, right? Because if the moment you over-explain it is the moment that someone who knows more than you, and believe me, there are so many people who know more about biology than I do, that will just like, aha, I got you now, right? And so I explained just enough that where the biologist goes, there is not, oh, that can't be done. But they were like, well, how would that be done? And the same with, when I'm doing science fiction and we're doing spaceships going faster than light. I don't believe you can go faster than light, but if you have them traverse an alternate universe to get to wherever they're going, they're like, well, you could make an Alcubierre warp bubble and then just detach and then come, and they will explain it in their own brains sufficiently. And then when they come and see me, they're like, I know what you were doing. You were doing blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yes. That is exactly what I Whereas,
Exactly.
and that's like, yeah, and that's 90%, and that's, that's the 10% of people who like, care. The 90% of people don't care, but
No.
having that explanation there or having them deal with this sort of stuff and putting, as they say, a lampshade on it, makes it more real because you are by acknowledging this is ridiculous. Well, it is ridiculous until and here's all this information that I don't actually like picture. I just have them be like, now you get to read all of this stuff. You're a scientist, and I have literally have the scientist reading, going, "Oh, I see. Well, that's fascinating. Oh, I didn't think about that before. That makes me look great."
Oh, totally. No, I mean, I think plausibility, what you're saying is plausibility is just as much a function of what you leave out as what you put
Yes.
in. Like, do not over explain it because um, some things you just want to be true, or you have
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
true for the story to work, and don't look
Right.
too close. And so this brings
Right.
me into another question, which is so Kaiju Preservation Society is it's a very pleasurable book to read, everybody. And what I one of the first um, one of the first comparisons that came to my mind was actually the 21 Balloons, which is a famous children's novel from like the 20s or the 30s. And it's about, a imaginary tropical island, and basically people have homes there but nobody ever knows about it. It's very pleasurable. And this is sort of a departure for you in the sense of like there's more pleasure than brutality. And
Sure.
so
Sure.
yeah, and so I wondered what elements of this alternate dimension you've created are wish fulfillment on your part, and clarifying. I think wish fulfillment used correctly in writing is wonderful. It's
Yeah.
often not
No, I
well
mean
used.
all. Right. I mean, all of it is wish fulfillment, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and on one level, on the creation level, it was me needing to write a happy, fun story, right? Or something that was at least surface level light, right? On the second level, it was me imagining a world where science was respected, right? Where science was a thing that everybody was like, yes, science, obviously this makes sense that we would be doing these things the way that we are doing, that scientists are respected, that the work that they do, that the research that they have to undertake in order to explain the universe was appreciated, because we are now kind of in a trough with science, where so much what would be simple if we actually followed the science has been, roadblock has been put up because of political issues, and quite frankly, it's flummoxing to me, as someone who fancies themselves, whether or not it's true, as a fairly rational individual, that we wouldn't follow the science in things like COVID, and things like how human nature works, and how human biology works, and all of these sorts of things. So that was a wish fulfillment as well. Almost everybody who is in the book is a scientist of some sort, or at least understands the value of science. And then it was also wish fulfillment, and I want super big creatures to exist, and wouldn't it be cool? And why wouldn't we have that? It's also wish fulfillment in the sense of, I like the idea of communities of people relying on each other, uh, acknowledging each other's expertise, participating as a group, not just because they have to, but because they recognize that this is a way that everybody moves forward. It's not entirely a coincidence that the population of Tanaka Base, which is where most of the events happen, is about 150 people, right? There's that saying that most people can hold about 150 people in their brain, and that's your tribe, right? Tanaka Base is a tribe. And that is something that I think is important for people to see in the relationship of this story is that people are important, not only to the story but to each other, and the story doesn't get done because of the actions of only one person. There's particularly a group of people where if they don't all work together, all using their particular set of expertise and their personalities and their knowledge and belief in each other, then things just don't get done. And so all of these things are wish fulfillment. The book is one big "wouldn't it be nice," to quote the Beach Boys. Wouldn't it be nice if we had kaiju? Then they would stomp all over the world. I don't know. Don't,
We would all work
I'm
together.
gonna.
We would all band together like an Independence Day, and we would. Well, in
Right,
case of Independence Day, the aim is different. In this book, the aim is to preserve the kaiju. And
right,
one of the
right.
things I loved most was the camaraderie between all of the characters and just the
Yeah,
easy familiarity they had with each other, how they instantly became friends, how there are traditions at this base to leave presents and
sure.
notes for people. Like all of that just
Yeah.
felt really comforting. Really comforting. Like this is a place that will kill you lethally, and I really wanted to go there.
Right. And the thing about it is that I have some, I think we all have experience in what are almost like liminal communities like that. Like, for example, I just got back from this thing that's called the Joko Cruise. It's based off Jonathan Colton and a bunch of his friends. They're nerd musicians. They started doing this cruise. It's gone on for 10 years. There's a real community there. It really exists. It has its traditions. It has all the things that it does. It only really exists one week out of a year, and then not at all last year because of course, COVID. But that 1 year it exists, it is super concrete. Everybody is engaged in it, and then everyone disperses and comes back. Summer camp, another example of that.
Yeah.
Worldcon or other science fiction conventions where people go to them regularly, and you would only see this community only exists in one place or another one. Someone just put Dragon Con's another one. Exactly. Once a year, everybody comes to Dragon Con and does the parade and does the last dance at Alderaan. And then everybody disperses again. And it doesn't make that one place any less real that it only exists in a certain place in a certain time. We all have our Brigadoon communities, so to speak. And I think that that's one of the things that I wanted to capture.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll follow up on that, and then I have my trick question at the end. Not a trick question,
Oh, trick
flashy
question.
question. No,
Flashy question. Okay.
but there is. Oh no, it's turning into a comment rather than a question. Damn. Let's see if I can wrangle a
You've
question out of
become you've become what you swore not to be.
it. The comment was there's a really lovely moment when one member of a team leaves a note for the incoming member of the team and says, "I can't do this anymore. I can't be in this
Mhm.
alternate universe anymore because it doesn't feel real." And it feels like my
Yeah,
whole life is imaginary because I can't tell anybody about this. And there was a
yeah,
lot
yeah.
of poignance around that. And so I was wondering if um, that comes from your experience too, where there's just like a sort of bittersweetness around these, group experiences that you wish you could share them more and you can't.
Right, 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 right. Well, the thing about it is that, I mean, again, I think that that happens with a lot of people in life. There's so many things that you would say, that you can't experience unless you've experienced it, right? No matter what it is, whether it's a community or whether it's a particular rite of passage or whatever it is, that you try to explain it to somebody else, and it always falls flat, right? But as far as it goes, this is but this is the way it is. It's sort of like when people explain dreams to you, right? The dream it's never as interesting to anyone who didn't have the dream with you. It's very much the same sort of thing here, right? Where you cannot experience it. I mean, you can't tell, you have to experience. As they say, you can't tell people about the Matrix, they have to see what it else is itself. So
Mhm.
as far as it goes, that's where we are with this. I mean, it is a lot of one of the things about books is it's very much that sort of thing. You are brought into a world where so often you cannot just describe it to other people. You have to give them the book and say, read the book. And you hope that the experience of the book that they have is the experience that you had so that you can geek out about it together. And sometimes it is, in which case you're like, oh my God, 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 right? And sometimes it's not where you're like, where they're like, this, I don't, I mean, I read it, it was okay, but I kind of felt that way about Hamilton. Like I had so many friends who loved Hamilton so much. They really, really, really just totally like got into it, right? And I went and saw it, and I thought it was really good, but I did not have that same attachment to them. I'm not going to be sitting there like using, Hamilton quotes all the time about, how, at any moment. And in some sort of sense, I felt bad about that because this was really such a formative or, a moment for so many of my friends. And yet, I was like, yeah, it was good. Sure, I'd see it again, I guess. Where they're like, no, I have listened to the Hamilton soundtrack 15 times today. Or they go to the jam-alongs, right, where people just do the karaoke to the Hamilton and all this sort of stuff. And this is the thing where you're like, whatever gives you joy, I want you to do that thing and have a
Yeah.
really good time with it. But it's not my thing, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so, yeah, that chasing that experience of, I want to share this with you. I want you to have this experience. And sometimes you can't just you can't tell them the experience. You have to just hope that when they have the chance to read the book or go to the place that you love or see the person who is your new best friend or whatever, that they have the same experience with them that you did. And sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't. And that's just kind of the way that it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, Tanaka Base, for everybody who's about to read, felt to me like a kind of home, and so I hope you will also feel the same way when you read it. Okay, now I have to get to the other to the audience members' questions. I'll ask you the trick question real quick, and off the top of your head, and it's a question that I was asked recently, and I really liked it. If you were an action figure, what two accessories would you come with?
Oh, well, one would obviously be Coke Zero. I mean,
Okay.
that's just a given. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think I would come also with a utility burrito.
Please unpack that for us, please. What's
I
utility?
mean, quite literally, I'm packing. Well, Batman has a utility belt, right? They like literally everything that he needs.
Oh,
It's his Deus Ex Machina. It's his Deus Ex belt, right?
yes.
And it is because whatever he needs
Pull out what
is,
you need out of the
yeah.
burrito.
It's
Okay.
like, thankfully, I have my Bat Bear spray, right, or whatever, right? He just happens to have it in his belt. I am known for my questionable burritos. And so it would only make sense that in a moment of crisis, I would pull out a burrito and be like, this burrito has capsaicin in it. Chuck it at someone. They're like, my eyes, no. And then we would all escape or whatever. Right.
And then it
So,
regenerates somehow, or yes, you
yeah,
rewrap another one in the lab that
right.
has
Exactly.
exactly what you need for the next adventure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Exactly. So, yes, Coke Zero, utility burrito. These are my two action figure things. And quite
I
frankly, if we don't have fan art of this by tomorrow, I will be deeply disappointed.
disappointed. Disappointed in the internet. All right. So I am going to the questions. So there is one from Lila that is top voted. Oh,
Uh-oh.
I think I know the
Uh-oh.
answer to this one. I know the answer to this one. If you were to collaborate with another author just for fun, who would it be and what would you want to write?
Oh, you know the answers to this.
I
Go ahead and say it. I want to see if you remember correctly.
Nobody ever for any reason.
Yeah, that's pretty much accurate.
That
And the
was
reason it's not,
unnecessarily hard.
yeah, and the reason is not because it's like, I am a genius. How dare you think that I would collaborate with anyone and dilute my awesomeness? But more of, I am literally the worst person. And so, the thing about collaboration is it really has to be a meeting of minds. And I pretty sure I would get impatient and be snappish and awful. Now that's not to say that it couldn't ever happen, but I think the way that it would have to happen is not, and this sounds so terrible, and I acknowledge the terribleness of it. Um, but somebody would have to be driving that bus, right? Somebody would have to be in charge of it and basically like, here's what we're going to do and here's how we're going to do it. Here's what I need you to do. Go off and do it, right? And then somebody would go off and do it and they would bring it back. And I would have to be the person that drives the bus because I'm a control freak. Not, in a very subtle way, almost in every other circumstance. But when it comes to writing, I'm like, so, and I don't, and so, yeah, with the exception of that particular way of doing things, which is not something that a lot of people would necessarily sign on for. I don't really see collaborations. That said, it would be fun. Theoretically, it'd be fun to collaborate. I would collaborate with you theoretically, Monica,
I would,
even
yeah,
though our writing styles are so completely different and all
completely
that sort of stuff.
different.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't want to end our friendship, right? Because it would be like a side of me that you're like, wow, control freak Scalzi, I need to stab him. So
Well, well, especially because both of us are like that though. I am also a
yeah, yeah,
control freak in my own very particular writing style, and I don't actually think that that is all that rare.
yeah.
I really envy people who can give over their books to collaborators. Like
Mhm.
I can't imagine doing
Sure.
that. So there's that.
Right. Now,
So
now,
here,
oddly
yeah, go
enough,
ahead.
when I'm doing, and then we'll get to the next question. Oddly enough, when I'm doing stuff like when I'm writing in like scripts or stuff that is in LA or other situations where you go in knowing it's a collaboration, right? That's a completely different thing, right? Like that's a completely different mindset. But like, no, my novels are mine. So yeah, no, that's that's
Well,
that's
it's the
where my control
one.
freak is.
Yeah, it's I mean, same for me, plays and screenplays. Like novels are where I have complete control. That is the
Mm-hmm.
realm of art in which I have complete control, and I don't want to give that up. Okay, John
Yeah.
Christopher says,
Next one.
"Will this be a single or will there be more in the universe?" I did notice some doors left open, so I'm interested in
So
those.
with relation to kaiju,
Yes.
um, I everything that I've ever written, with the exception of the Interdependency series, right, was written as a standalone, right? Because you don't know, right?
Yeah.
If I had but like Kaiju Preservation Society, the first in the Kaiju Earth series, right, and it flops because it might, who knows, it might flop. Then I'm kind of stuck, writing 5 books in a series that I already know is dead meat. So what tends to happen is the book comes out, and then if people really like it, then Tor comes back to me and says, "Would you like to write more? Here's a bucket of money." And for a bucket of money, who doesn't like a bucket of money?
Yeah.
I might write more. Now, that's only sometimes. Like Red Shirts, people are like, "When's the sequel to Red Shirts?" And the answer to that is never. Right? That story is what it is. And I say never, but if they like Tor came and said $3 million for the sequel to Red Shirts, I'm like, I do have cats. They do need to be fed. So what
You
I'm
would
saying
think
is
of
I'm
something.
bribable. I'm bribable, but the bribes have to be pretty significant.
Right.
But I wouldn't mind going back into the kaiju universe. I have some vague inklings of ideas that I might put into it, but for now it's standalone. And if it only ever remains a standalone, I'm actually perfectly okay with it. I think that story is a story, and it's a complete story in and of itself.
I would agree. It works as a standalone, and there are doors left open throughout the
Sure.
text, which were intriguing to me. So always give yourself an out, or a not an out, a sequel possibility. Yes.
Sure.
Here's a question I really like. As a sci-fi author, how do you balance scope versus execution? Have you ever had to scale back an idea?
Um, Not necessarily the idea in and of itself. The thing that gets me is not necessarily scope, but how I am presenting it. So, like, the interdependency is a perfectly good idea, answer to this. When I first started writing it, I tried doing it on a more sort of Frank Herbert-esque scope. Like the first Dune, where you really do. For me, Herbert's prose really, it's like this incredibly vast space, right? And these little players are in it, and they're moving around in this, and you're always conscious for me of this vast space. So I tried to write that sort of vast space into the interdependency, and it just really didn't work for me. I don't write like Frank Herbert writes, and that presentation was not working for me. So I zoomed it in to address three specific characters, right? And those three specific characters, were the heart of the story: Kiva and Mars and Cardinia. And the story still has the same scope. It is literally a galaxy-spanning story, about the collapse of a interstellar empire and stuff like that. So I feel the scope and scale is there. But it's always seen over the shoulder of these three particular characters. And so that, I think, is probably the closest come to answering that particular question. Scope is never the issue, but the presentation of it is.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I Judicious editing of the scope. I mean, there's a lot to talk about, like what comes first for you. And there are questions actually
Mhm.
along the lines of that.
Yeah.
But there's one I a question I really like, which is, you write witty dialogue exceptionally well. Does this
Thank you.
translate to the real world? Do you kill at cocktail parties?
I mean, I'm an unreliable source for the answer to this because, this is the sort of thing where you're like, I'm very witty. The thing that you often say that you are is the thing that you are not. Like when people tell you they're classy, or when they tell you they're funny, or they're, whatever it is I'm a free thinker. And you find out that they basically have the same six opinions as everybody else. So I can say that I have always been fairly quick on, yeah. And Monica, you know me, so check me on this. I'm fairly quick on the response, right? I can be kind of amusing in the moment. Um, but that comes with its own flip side. I spent many, many, many years before I learned that the appropriate response was not always a quip. And had I learned that younger, you know, there were some places, there were some people I would not have offended as much as I had. And so the thing about dialogue is dialogue isn't speech. It is exposition that mimics speech, and it does the thing that carries the story forward. Actual human speech has ums and ahs and backtracks and asides, and people say things that they don't mean and can't necessarily take them back. Um, because I have been a more or less public individual for 3 decades. I mean, I've always written for newspapers, and so even when I was younger, I was always kind of a micro celebrity in my area, right? First at the University of Chicago, and then in Fresno, California, where I was the movie critic. So I was always aware that I had to do a public face, and so the public face being quick on the response, but at the same time, having, being recognizing the context. My own responses are closer to dialogue many times than they are to actual human speech. And that's an aspect of, being aware of being on. If you come to see me, and someone noted, well, when I saw you at the National Book Fair, you were very quippy. And the answer to that is because I'm on when I am at the National Book Fair. I am John Scalzi performing monkey, and John Scalzi performing monkey is on all the time, and that's what he does. John Scalzi, when he's not performing monkey, is as inarticulate and schlubby as anybody, right? Because that's because I'm off the clock. I don't have to be clever, right? And I think it's really important that people understand that there is that distinction there.
Yeah, and I can also vouch for, I mean, you have just seen an event of us together. John is delightful
Mhm.
in real life as well. I mean, you are on now, right? And so am I. So it's
Right, I definitely
completely
on now.
different. Yes, yes, exactly. But no, uh well, he doesn't drink cocktails, but I can vouch that he is still a delight at mocktail parties. Um
we
Sean
should
asked,
probably we
yeah,
should
there
probably be
was.
wrapping up soon. So let's do these as quickly as we can get through, like three or four of them.
Oh, three or four of them. Okay, I was gonna end on one, but
Okay, well,
let's.
no, we can do that too.
Okay, Sean asks, "What kaiju would you put on a burrito?"
What kaiju would you put? None of them, because in order to put them on a burrito, you would have to process them. I think that's the euphemistic thing,
Yeah,
and you would need a very very large tortilla for that. So as far as it goes, and I'm not going to, at least the kaiju I've written. The way that you would get them is after they've expired on their own, and in the world that I've created, when they expire on their own, there are lots of other things that are going to have first dibs to them. You do not want to go up and like, oh, I'm just going to take this tenderloin and make a burrito out of it, because you will end up in some creature's burrito. That's all I'm going to say on that one.
you will, and also you will end up glowing possibly.
Yes.
So I'm just excited for you all to read this because as the sort of reveals kept happening as the plot went on, I just kept laughing so much. I was like, that makes no sense and yet perfect sense at the same time. So and the whole book is like that. So a goddamn delight as always. Everyone, I mean, all of you have bought the book. So as soon as you get it in the mail, 8 to 10 business days from now, signed copy, read it and tell all your friends, and just like enjoy it, make your favorite drink, and just like knock it out in a sitting or two, because that's how it's meant to be read. I
Yeah.
think. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right.
Okay. Great. Well,
Monica,
thank you
you're
so much,
awesome.
John.
Thank you
Oh
so
my
much for doing this. I was so excited when you said yes. And we were like, Monica, will you do this thing with me? Because you're awesome. Yeah.
It was an honor to be asked. Thank you, and thank you everybody for tuning in. And yeah, we'll carry on,
Yes.
carry on, and this will help.
All right, everybody. Thank you
All
so
right,
much. Bye
bye.
bye.